tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal, it's hit him on the pad, he's out! Lions gone, New South Wales are 9 down! Onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car! Oh, I think it's hit a car! What a way to bring up your 50!
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Manners. This is the longest running cricket podcast in Australia. And joining me, we're a day late, but look, his camera's working so we can see his beautiful face, is Damien Watson from Melbourne. Damien, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, Manners. Hopefully I'll look okay through the camera. It's hopefully not at 1995 levels. It probably is, but the main thing is you can see me. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I suppose it's another question.
Yes, well, I think we'll just ignore Victor's complaints, but yeah, we'll look at an upgrade over summer. But anyway, lots to come on this podcast. So much to talk about. We've got a tribute to Bob Simpson. We'll be looking at the Australia v South Africa white ball series and some other cricket news. And there's lots to come up on the cricket podcast over the next couple of weeks. I'm catching up with Lisa Sthalekar to record another episode over the weekend. She's been over in the MLC and she's got lots to talk about. So you'll be getting an extra episode early next week with Lisa. I'm also catching up with Jack Edwards next week, the Australia A player and New South Wales skipper. So we'll see how he's travelling. He's heading off to India with the Australia A squad in a couple of weeks. So that'll be an interesting chat. And then the week after that, catching up with Lauren Cheadle, Australian left-arm quick, who is preparing for the domestic summer. So lots to come on Cricket Unfiltered. But let's start, Damien, tonight in this episode with the Ashes banter has begun. So I had a bit of a tete-a-tete, good-natured tete-a-tete with Michael Vaughan on Twitter. He tweeted out, Mitch Marsh to open in the Ashes wouldn't be the worst shout. Now, I think it would be a terrible idea. Mitch Marsh is not an opening batter. If he at all gets a look in, it'll be in the middle order where he's best suited. So I quote tweeted Michael Vaughan's tweet and said, this is a trick, a square up for Ponting telling England to play Bashir in every test. Don't fall for it. And I think I'm onto something, Damien. I think Varney was trying to, goad Australia into making a similar mistake.
I think so too. And I noticed he responded in kind as well. It shows, Manners, that you have a bit of clout. The fact that he was able to quote tweet out of all the responses, he noticed yours, Manners. So
yeah, that's right. He quote tweeted, says, who are you opening with, Manners? And I replied, not Marsh. But it was good natured. But, I think a certain amount of truth in it. I think Ponting telling England to play Bashir in every test is some deep sabotage from Ponting. And I think, I don't know if Vaughan actually meant it, but Mitch Marsh opening in the Ashes is just a terrible idea. He's never been, he has never wanted to open the batting in Test cricket when it has been available in the past.
How many chances was he given, less than 12 months ago, Manners? I mean, I would have thought, unless he absolutely bangs down the door again, even his place in the Australian Test team, why would you go back to the well there?
Absolutely. So anyway, the banter has begun. I do really like Michael Vaughan. We've met a few times. He's a lovely guy, but also he's good-natured and good-humoured. But let's get into the cricket headlines brought to you by Piccolo Podcasts. And the biggest story of the week, Damien, I was taken aback when I heard this news on Saturday that Bob Simpson had passed away at the age of 89. An enormous figure in Australian cricket, an enormous figure in my childhood as a cricket fan. He loomed large over the Australian team as Australian coach. I didn't see him play, but I'd heard the legend of what a good player he was. And then when he came back in his 40s to lead the team in the World Series days, and he was such a titanic figure in Australian cricket. It was quite shocking to hear the news. I'd heard he wasn't well, but the tributes flowed in. And Damien, I thought it was quite a big reaction, a groundswell of ex-players and cricket fans recognizing his tremendous achievement. And I'm glad, just because he's been out of the game for a while, he wasn't forgotten.
Absolutely. And he achieved so much in various facets of the game as well, mentoring young players, Menners, as you mentioned. His time as a coach, he really did take Australia, along with many others, of course, but that particular stint took Australia from being easy beats, it must be said, in the mid-'80s to being basically the best in the world. And he obviously, he didn't necessarily get along with everyone, although he and Ian Chappell didn't always get along, for instance, but you got to admire his charismatic nature. He was a very good batsman. Him coming back into the fold as a skipper in his early 40s, I think, during the World Series cricket era. I think people forget. I mean, everyone talks about the World Series cricket and how it revolutionised the game, and rightly so. But people forget about the forgotten 11, shall we say, and he was a central figure in that, coming back into the fold and performing as well as he did and taking Australia to reasonable success. I know they had some failures along the way as well during that 2-year period where there was that dichotomy between them and World Series cricket. But at the same time, to a series win against India with a pretty young side, a lot of people, a lot of players who played under him spoke with such reverence about the way he led the team. He was a genuine leader, wasn't he? And massive loss to the game. We know how good he was in his pomp as well as a batsman, and had that deep voice, Menners. I loved his voice. He had a great voice too. And it's just a sad loss. As you said, it still came as a shock, didn't it, even though he's 89 years of age. So, yeah, rest in peace, Bob Simpson.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been compared to Don Bradman in his terms of contribution to Australian cricket. He was a fine player as a top order batsman. He formed a great partnership with Bill Lawry, where they averaged almost 61 for the opening position when they went to the crease together 62 times. So that's an excellent record. He captained Australia in 39 tests, that broken up over his initial period in the 60s until he retired as a fairly young man. And then when he came back at the age of 41, and then he was a coach of the team from 1986 to 1996. And he really did turn Australian cricket around. Australian cricket was in the doldrums. They were struggling to win test matches. They were a very ragged side that had been torn apart by rebel tours to South Africa. There was infighting, and Simpson, really invested in youth, picked some young players, Ian Healy, Steve Ward, Jeff Marsh, David Boone, what would go on to become Titans, Mark Taylor, that would go on to become Titans of Australian cricket. And he turned Australia around, of course, with that famous 87 World Cup win. And then that flowed into the regaining of the Ashes in 1989. And then they didn't really look back. And when he retired as coach in 1996, Australia really was unquestionably the best side in the world in all formats. And he made a tremendous contribution, obviously well known for his, focus on fielding and running between the wickets. And, he really did revolutionize the game with those factors. Australia was leaps and bounds ahead of other teams in those areas. And you think about how cricket is played now, everything has followed that. So, he really revolutionized white ball cricket. I heard Craig McDermott being interviewed on the radio, RSN, now part of your mob, Damien.
Yes.
Have been brought up by Hutchie, so
Yeah.
your colleague, and he was being interviewed, and he mentioned, what a partnership Bob Simpson and my good friend, good family friend Ian McDonald, the former manager, formed as a management team and toughening up that side. They were facing, the great West Indies team who dominated Australian cricket. Australia had struggled against England, but Simo and McDonald really toughened that team up. And back then, it was such a different environment. Players weren't paid a lot. So playing for Australia was a bit of a party. You might not have got paid a lot, but you got invited to a lot of parties. There was a lot of free drinks for you. There was a lot of ladies who wanted to go out with you. And it was a real job keeping the players together. But, Simo and Macca did that. And there was a great story in the Sydney Morning Herald a couple of years ago where, went into the dressing room after a loss to the West Indies where Bob Simpson and Ian McDonald told the team, you just got to toughen up. This isn't good enough anymore to let these guys push you around out there. You got to take a stand. And, from 88, 89, Australia went on to great things. So, Simpson really did leave a lasting impact on the team as well, Damien. I mean, I was thinking about this. His sort of work ethos and the way he approached cricket, although there were nuances and changes, but his overall philosophy of, Australia working harder than everybody else and being the best fielding side, that didn't really wear off until Justin Langer got the boot. Andrew McDonald in a different time now has taken a different approach. But I think Simpson's ethos sort of flowed through Australian cricket for so many years after his retirement as coach. And, that's a huge legacy.
Absolutely. And when you think about the principles that he set in place as well, Manners, they really did flow through as well. Just that sheer hard work that you mentioned. They were professional. I know that they weren't necessarily the best in the world when he came along, but I think they really set the standard for professionalism in cricket under him, and that's flowed on as well. So it's not just a legacy in Australian cricket. I think it's a legacy in world cricket he's created.
Absolutely.
In the way that he drove professionalism really into the game and, focused on every facet as well. And I think Australia's rise in that sense precipitated a rise in professionalism elsewhere as well.
And he was really the first national professional coach ever.
Yeah.
And that has obviously, you see every nation has a coach now. So just a huge contribution. He was a very stubborn man. He was very strong-willed. I think he had a big hand in Dean Jones' Test career ending quite prematurely. But overall, he just had such an enormous impact on Australian cricket. He played 62 tests for Australia, made almost 5,000 runs. He also took 71 wickets. He was a tremendous all-round player. And those that saw him in the slip say he was the best slip fielder they've ever seen until perhaps Mark Waugh. So that's an incredible plaudits to him. And I have one story about Simo. So they say that you couldn't get anything past Bob Simpson, and I fell victim to that when I was a young man. So, I was good friends with him, family friends with Ian McDonald, the Australian team manager, and I was at the Australian team hotel for a party in one of the hotel rooms, and they were staying in the Rocks. Sure. I can't exactly remember. This wasn't a tour. I think it was around before a World Series game in summer. And it would be in the early 90s, the first half of the 90s. And I was about 15 or 16, and I was going to a party in, I think, Ian McDonald's room. And so I go in, and Bob Simpson's there, Ian Healy's there, David Boone was there, Jeff Marsh. There's a few other people. It was a lovely setting. And I'm obviously very nervous because there's members of the Australian cricket team here. I'm a teenager. And the night before, I had been out on a date with a lovely young lady, and she had got a bit over exuberant in her passion, and she'd left a few sort of love marks, as they say, on my neck, and as you do when you're 15 or 16. And so I'm at this party, and we're all sitting around, and Bob Simpson looks over at me. This is, you're all sitting around in a circle in a hotel room. He points to me, says, "What's that on your neck?" So, I'm mortified. As you can imagine, there's, Ian Healy's looking at me, Booney's there, Swampy. I mean, you can imagine I am dying at this point. So I panic and I say, I got hit by a cricket ball. Simo goes, "I'm the Australian cricket coach. I know what a cricket ball looks like. That isn't from a cricket ball." So, I sulked away, Damien, in sheer embarrassment at that, at Simo busting me. And, my parents were there as well. So it was just very embarrassing. The only thing that was lucky about that was I left not long after that in embarrassment. I just went home, and after I left, Alan Border turned up, and I was really annoyed that I left before AB turned up. But anyway, that's my story. So you really couldn't get anything past him. He busted me with my love marks.
Did you ever meet him later in life, Menas, in your professional life?
I don't think so. I was trying to think if I'd seen him in the last 10 years anywhere, maybe at a Cricket New South Wales dinner, but I hadn't seen him for a while, no. Robert Craddock was on with Gerard Whateley and said allegedly he'd been suffering from dementia maybe towards the end, so I don't think he'd been out in public much. But yeah, but he was always very friendly to me when I was a young man. He was warm, funny, but yeah, tough man. And yeah, I wouldn't want to have been playing under him because he got me, that's for sure.
What happened to that girl?
Oh, another probably sad story in my love life, Damien. All right, so let's get into the cricket results from the last week. Since the last podcast, Australia beat South Africa in the decider for the third T20 International being played in Cairns. Australia won the series 2-1. South Africa batted first, made 172 for 7. Brevis made 53 off 26. He looked like he might win another one for South Africa, but then in the chase, Mitch Marsh and Glenn Maxwell got the job done with only one ball to spare. Mitch Marsh finally got some runs, 54 off 37, a timely return to form, and then Glenn Maxwell, 62 not out of just 36 balls, hit the winning runs with some dynamic stroke play. And he'd had a bit of a quiet series, so he fired when it was really needed. A good little partnership at the end. Ben Dwarshuis, although only faced 6 balls, he stayed out there for almost 25 minutes with Maxwell and gave him the strike. And I thought, Damien, that was a really good little T20 series, really worthwhile, very competitive, a great TV product. And in the end, we got it. As a viewer, you saw it all. In the other matches, some of the other younger players performed. And then in this final match, the veterans, Mitch Marsh and Glenn Maxwell, got it done.
Yeah, and I think it's good to see a spread of contributions as well in that respect, Manners. I think it could be improved upon. But, yeah, good to see that David had his moment in the series. Cam Green had his moment in the series. Mitch Marsh, as you said, Glenn Maxwell after a bit of an inauspicious start to the series. But, yeah, Tim David for me was fantastic right throughout if you look at the T20 series holistically. And I think the attention surrounding it as well, Manners. I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of attention this is garnered locally in Australia because we're in the middle of the respective footy code seasons. And I've got to say, I thought it would fade into obscurity, but there's been a lot of talk about it just in general amongst the water cooler gatherings, Manners. So it has been a good TV product. It'd be nice if the commentators were actually at the venue, but I suppose it's hard these days. And yeah, I think it's been a good series so far across a variety of formats.
Yeah, interesting. So a couple of things there. You're right. The crowds has really made it exciting. The fact that these smaller parts of Australia in the north haven't had international cricket for so long, to see the way the locals have embraced it has just made it more compelling to watch. You mentioned the commentators not being there. I actually don't watch cricket with the commentary on that much, so it doesn't really affect me, but there has been some talks around that. And I do think that if pay television are going to pay to have these games exclusively, they probably should send the commentators there. I think that is a bare minimum. If they're going to be behind a paywall, and I think you should actually send the commentators there and do it in person. I know it's expensive, but it can't be that expensive, because the real cost of a broadcast is actually the cameraman and those type of things, Hawkeye and Snicko. So I don't know. I'd rather have, a couple of commentators up there than them in studio.
Well, I think particularly with cricket, Manners, because how many times do you see the ball in the air and the commentators are really just guessing? It is what it is, I suppose. So I'm probably speaking about it from a selfish point of view, but I'd like to see more of that. I suppose they didn't anticipate the amount of interest it would get this series, and they thought, well, there's no point flying people And it is a long way, I suppose. You're going right to the other side of the country. It'd be pretty expensive in that respect. But
And I don't think it makes a huge difference, though, in terms of the viewing product. If you've got professional commentators that can call the game, I think you can do a pretty serviceable job on the television calling it off there. Although you're right, when the ball's going into the deep, we saw the commentators get caught out a few times where it was going for 6 or being caught, but that can happen. But I just think from a principle point of view, if you're going to have the games behind a paywall and you want them exclusively, maybe invest just a little bit more in the coverage to build it up as much as you can. But on that series, a couple of other standouts. Well, Tim David, as you mentioned, he scored 250s. He was the leading run scorer, all and a strike rate of almost 180. But the other player I want to shout out was Ben Dwarshuis. He played all 3 games. His runs per over was just 7.25. He took 5 wickets. And when you compare that to Josh Hazlewood, who played all 3 games, he took 6 wickets, but his run rate was 9.41. So Ben Dwarshuis, we've seen him do it for the Sydney Sixers by really good overs in T20 cricket. He's also now playing for the Australian 50 over side. As Mitch Starc comes to the end of his career, Ben Dwarshuis is definitely shaping up as a really good option in white ball cricket for Australia. Spencer Johnson hasn't quite been able to make the same impression, also had some injuries, but Dwarshuis doing really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And good to see it translates as well, Metters. Sometimes that's a concern, whether that next step up from domestic level to international level can be displayed in a effective way when you make that next step up. And sometimes it's difficult for players. So it's good to see that he's done just that. But he's a campaigner that's been around for a while now. So I'm not entirely surprised. And hopefully there's more reward for him in this format too. Hopefully we see that. We've got some fixtures to come in limited overs formats in October. So maybe he can stand out there.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to take our first break on the podcast. Before we go, just want to remind you, we've got great new Cricket Unfiltered merch. So if you want to get ready for the summer, you can go to the link in the episode notes to the merchandise shop. There'll be more T-shirts coming next month in the lead up to the Ashes. And I want to thank Exactamundo, the great company we're working with. All the details are there if you need support as well with video work or T-shirts and stuff. They've really helped us out, an old listener to the show. So head into the episode notes. Also, if you want to get in touch, send any questions in for me or Damien, the link is in the episode notes. Also, if you want to sponsor the show, please reach out through the episode notes for summer. All right, we'll be back in a moment. You are listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Menas. I'm with Damien Watson. And so the T20 series, Australia won 2-1. Then we moved into the 50 over format. And I have to say, Damien, the scarcity of Australian 50 over games does make me appreciate them more. The fact that we don't play them very often, I do enjoy them. And I was very surprised at this, Damien. South Africa is the only 50 over team Australia has a losing record against, which is why South Africa never winning a 50 over World Cup is even more stunning, because Australia are the benchmark for cricket and they've got a winning record against us, but they can't translate that into 50 over World Cup success. But I was really blown away by that. They the only team that they have who has a winning record against us. As it stands after the first game, Australia played 111 games against South Africa, won 51, lost 56. So there's not much in it. But I actually thought, maybe India have got a winning record against us. Well, we've played 152 games against India. We've won 84 and India have won 58. So quite a big gap there. So, yeah, South Africa are our nemesis in 50 over cricket, and they showed it again, smashing us in the game by 98 runs.
Absolutely. You go back though, man, as you're right. I think in the big games in the World Cups, obviously 99 stands out, and 2007 as well when we smashed them in the Caribbean. Aside from those big tournaments, I think when they've come here, I know we beat them in the 97-98 triangular series, but they won the first final at the MCG, and they were always pretty competitive against us. And even in 01-02, remember, that was during the one time during Australia's golden era where Australia struggled randomly at the limited overs format, and were actually bundled out, didn't even make the finals in that summer of 01-02. So
and that brought about the end of Steve. That brought about the end of Steve Waugh's one-day career.
Correct, and a couple of others as well. I think Mark Waugh, who had made probably the biggest one-day score in history to that point earlier in that 01 calendar year. A year later, he was out of favour as well. So, yeah, holistically, they've had a reasonable record against. Just going back to the first one-dayer on Tuesday night, I mean, they have that power at the top of the order when they get it right, South Africa. They're very, very hard to stop. We know about Mark from him and what he's produced over time. I thought he was fantastic, 82 off 81 deliveries, and they have good leadership amongst the top of the order as well. How about Travis Head as a bit of a cameo, though? What did you make of that?
So South Africa batted first, made 8 for 296. As you say, Markram 82, Rickleton 33, Bavuma 65, Breitska 57, Wim Mulder 31 not out. So really good performance from South Africa. And yeah, you're right. Travis Head 4 for 57. Took 4 wickets with his dirty little off spinners. Ben Dwarshuis also 2 for 53. Yeah, Travis Head bowled well. Zampa took a bit of tap, 1 for 58. And then Australia were all out for 198. Didn't get near it. They were none for 60 and then collapsed to 6 for 89. Maharaj did the damage, 5 for 33. It was a procession in the middle order. Labuschagne out for 1, Green 3, Inglis 5, Alex Carey out first ball, Aaron Hardy 4. The only top scorer, the only sort of breath of fresh air, Mitchell Marsh 88 off 96, and Ben Dwarshuis 33 continued his good form with the bat. So you're right. It was a spinner's paradise there. Head 4 wickets and then Maharaj 5 for 33.
And I thought for a fleeting moment, Menners, when they got to about 6 for 160 and the run rate was looking okay, I thought, this might be a repetition of what happened. Remember that T20 match in the T20 series when Glenn Maxwell was gone for 1 and I think Australia were 5 for 70 odd, chasing a pretty decent T20 total, and they managed to get the job done for Tim David. I thought, this might happen again here with Mitch Marsh and Dwarshuis. But I think once they penetrated through that partnership, there wasn't a heck of a lot of sting in the tail. Yeah, a disappointing loss for Australia. They'll go back to the well. Really, that middle order needs to improve. I mean, when you Labuschagne with 1, Cam Green with 3, Josh Inglis 5, Alex Carey a golden duck, and Aaron Hardy, who's meant to be the next big thing when it comes to, I guess, being a decent all-rounder in the 50-over format and can't make runs. You've got to have a bit more depth there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, good to see Mitch Marsh back up his performance in the final T20 with another good score. So, really pleasing to see that now that he's a specialist batter, he needs to be a consistent run scorer at the top order. Good to see Ben Dwarshuis with the runs again. You know, there's been some surprise at his performances with the bat. I've actually seen him play quite a lot of cricket, commentated on a few games where he won T20 matches for his club side, Sutherland, as a batter. And what I like about Dwarshuis is he knows his strong hitting areas and he does tend to stick to them. We've also seen it for the Sydney Sixers when he wants to hit a big ball, he can. But then he's quite smart. He's a smart cricketer because he plays to his strengths and he can also nudge the ball around in areas he's less comfortable. So I really like that. And, you know, I've already seen him this series a couple of times hang around. Australia's play against spin was woefully bad. I don't think there can be any excuses about this being an off-season match. This is a match for Australia, big crowd. You got to do better than that. We look like a team that, as Mark Waugh said it, that had never seen left arm spin before. You know, we saw the first match without, you know, Steve Smith, Glenn Maxwell, Marcus Stoinis, and you have to say, you know, Smith and Maxwell are such proficient players of spin. Would it have been any different? And so, yeah, we're just seeing a bit of a turnover in Australia's 50-over team, but a long way to go for the 2027 World Cup. And, you know, finally, Marnus Labuschagne, look, it's just one failure, but I think considering he's been dropped from the test side, he comes back in here for Smith. He would want to score in this series, Damien.
Yeah, correct. He's just, I don't know if he's just down on confidence. I know he's a fastidious player at times with his technique and things like that, but I don't know if it's just a confidence thing at the moment. You sometimes can get into a bit of a rut. I'd still back him to try and get out of it. We've seen it with players in the past, but yeah, I don't know whether it's a confidence thing or if it's just a situation where he's been found out with his technique.
No, you're spot on. I don't know either. I believe he can come back. I'd love to see him come back. He's still relatively young. I think he's got lots of cricket in him. And, I look back at that 2023 World Cup where he made some invaluable contributions despite almost being dropped after every game. So anyway, so the second game is in Mackay. That is on Friday. So we're recording this Thursday night.
International game in Mackay, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, first ever men's international match. Yeah. It's in Mackay's Great Barrier Reef Arena, and it's officially sold out. So they're expecting 5,000 people, and it's going to be fantastic. You might be listening to this after that match, but this one day series is progressing. But there's been a bit of fallout from the first game. Adam Zampa has been fined for audibly swearing into this, and the stump mic picked it up, and that incurred a monetary fine and a demerit point. Ben Horn in the Daily Telegraph questioned the double standards because there were audible obscenities in the England v India Test series recently completed where no fines were issued, and Horn's got a valid point, and there are certain inconsistencies in the ICC when you look back to the Boxing Day Test where Virat Kohli crash tackled Sam Constas in the middle of the MCG and walked away with no fine or demerit point. I think you can see the inconsistencies, and also Subrian, the South African off spinner who made his debut, has been reported for a suspect action. He's also played a test. So it's interesting he played a test, wasn't reported, but was reported here. So it'll be interesting if South Africa play him. I think that's how you pronounce it, Subrian. That's the thing. I don't even listen to the TV commentary anymore. So sometimes I miss the pronunciation.
Half the time they're inconsistent as well with the pronunciation, I suppose. But just on suspect actions, Menners, do you think, given the resources we have today, particularly amongst the umpiring fraternity, surely if there's someone coming through, there's a uniform agreement as to how an action is perceived so that we don't have a repeat of what we saw with Morley and things like that where different umpires had different opinions? Surely you have some sort of democratic vote as to whether an action is suspect or not, and he avoids these sorts of things. We have access to a lot of vision now as a cricketing industry.
Yeah, I think it's a little idealistic. Like in Australia, I think you could absolutely do that at a state level, examine players when they sort of make that step up from semi-professional first grade to perhaps to playing for New South Wales or any state. But it's hard to police worldwide, and he's very difficult. I was looking at his action, and it's very similar to, say, a Chris Green. Not really a Matt Kuhneman, but there are shades of it, although they bowl with a different arm. But, it's very hard to tell this sort of angle and whether they're, breaching how many degrees it is before you deem to be throwing it. So, I just think it's a problem. The only thing I would say is I think it needs to be handled better than the way it was handled with Matt Kuhneman, after that 3-test series, and then all of a sudden he was reported. I think we need to get to international players quicker. I mean, that's what I think. If this player's played a test match, how come none of the umpires there reported him? So that's, I guess, an issue that, are the umpires being stringent enough on this when someone makes their debut? Because it's really incumbent on international umpires to police this.
And to do it in a consistent manner as well. I know everyone has different opinions, Menners, but I don't think it's a good reflection on the umpiring fraternity if they're at loggerheads in regards to interpretation as well of the action. That's Absolutely. Why I think if there's some form of communication, and you'd think there would be in this day and age, sort it out once someone notices something, sort it out then and there, have some sort of democratic vote as to whether it should be investigated further or whether it's just play on. Because at the end of the day, one person's interpretation is different. If you've got a majority at least, you've got some sort of consensus.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that is the fallout from the ODI series. As I said, it is continuing. I've been enjoying it. Right, now moving on to the Australia A v India A women's ODI series that was just played. Now, Damien, you commentated on the last game, I believe, and you probably got the best of them because Australia won and Alyssa Healy made a stirring century. But India A won that series 2-1, winning the first two games. And Damien, this is a surprise to me because I really didn't think India A could win series down here, but the fact that they've won the series is a bit of an ominous warning for what's to come for Indian women's cricket. Just tell me, what did you see in that last game, and how is Alyssa Healy looking as she prepares to come back to lead the Australian side in the World Cup?
Looking very strong, Alyssa Healy, and I know she's had moments in her career where she's had doubters, where she's lost form, when she's had injuries, etc. But she seems to find a way through, and she looked very good with her stroke play. She was very aggressive, happy to loft a couple of shots over cover for a couple of boundaries. She's very good down the ground, very good player straight down the ground, both aerially and also along the ground. Love the way she goes about it. Scored a mammoth century in very, very quick time as well. So she's looking the goods, it must be said. Talia Wilson, one of yours, Menners, over there in New South Wales, I thought played pretty well as well. If she wants to really challenge for that next generational keeping spot, though, to be a powerful keeper batter, she needs to probably make those or convert those starts into big scores. And I think she's got the capability to do it. She's certainly in the conversation as to whether she's that next generation keeper, probably between her and Nicole Fulton, the way things are going with selection. But yeah, Alyssa Healy was certainly the star of that third one day. It was a pretty comprehensive win for Australia A, but you're right. I think India A have exceeded expectations, and it is an ominous warning. I think there's always been that ominous warning. Once with the power and population of Indian cricket, once they got a domestic, a consistent domestic system in place, exposed female players to more and more cricket, I don't know. I think it's inevitable they're going to probably overtake Australia at some point and be the number one women's nation. We see how well the WPL is received and how much money and how much fortune and fame comes of it as well. I think it's inevitable. They probably, I don't know. I think that's what's going to happen. They'll take over. Given the depth that they have and good young players like Bhatia, Shafali Verma, once she gets going and starts into big scores more consistently, there's some good firepower there.
Look, I know there were some tight games, but you probably put a bit more attention into the ODI series than I did. I watched the games in the background. I mean, was that good enough from the Australia A side? Australia A side playing at home. I mean, were they complacent? Did they just not play well enough? I mean, should we be critical of them? I mean, women's cricket is often asking for a more sort of critical eye being put on them. I mean, a home series, you'd expect Australia A to dominate India A, and they had some, out and out international players in that Australia A side. I mean, was that good enough? I mean, you probably looked at it a bit more than I did.
Yeah, probably wasn't good enough. And yeah, I think you're open to scrutiny based on results. And you're right. I mean, you had Healy in that lineup, who had a very good series, it must be said, Menners. She made 91 in the second one-dayer as well. So I don't think you put too much fault on her. But you had Talia McGrath in there, who's a seasoned campaigner at the top level as well for Australia. So they had that level of experience. I know there were some younger players coming through, but yeah, they certainly deserve scrutiny because it's a results-based thing. If you want to take it seriously, they do deserve to be scrutinised. There was a bit of that, but I think there's some credit that needs to go to India A as well with the way they performed. We know the wickets are a little bit different, particularly they tend to be a bit flatter in the northern part of Australia than what they're used to, and yet they were able to extract as much out of it as possible.
Interesting. All right. Staying with Indian cricket, and actually we mentioned this recently, the ICC had approved first-class systems being allowed to trial injury replacements in first-class cricket. So it is reported on CricBuzz that the BCCI will add a serious injury replacement clause to their playing conditions for the upcoming domestic summer, meaning you could replace players who have a fracture or a cut or a dislocation and replace it for a like player. And there is some speculation this could actually also be trialed in the Sheffield Shield. So I've thought a lot about this, and although I'm not sure I'm a fan of this for international cricket yet, I would like to see it trialed at domestic level. I don't think there is anything harmed by trying it in domestic level and just seeing how it works when put under a bit of pressure before, for example, it's trialled at international level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the logical step to actually trial it at that level. I suppose the concern is whether it's going to be exploited if it ever does go to international level, Manners. I mean,
yeah, it'd be the Victorian team. It'd be the Victorian team that probably does it first.
This is the thing, right? It's just mitigating against that level of exploitation. So that's what I get concerned about.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm looking forward to actually seeing the trial. I'm sort of sitting on the fence about it. I just do think there is something to. So just say for example, the Ashes are 2-2 and they're going into the Sydney Cricket Ground. It's a decider, biggest game of the year, biggest test of the century. 2-2, Ashes on the line, packed houses, and on the first day, pick your player, Pat Cummins, falls over and breaks his leg on the Sydney Cricket Ground, bone protruding. It's a horrific scene. Cummins in severe distress. They have to put the tent around it so you can't see him, and he's taken away. and he's out. He's out. But it's the first day of the deciding test of this wonderful Ashes series, and Australia then have to play one player down for the rest of the match. And the fans that go there, does it ruin the spectacle? That's the issue. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. How often does it happen, though, Minners? I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah, it does. It probably does ruin the spectacle, but then you have that element of, well, at least it's a bit more of an even playing field. It depends on when it happens in the game as well. If it happens late in the game, there's a difference, isn't there? So this is the parameters you got to think about.
Yeah, and maybe it needs to be really just certain injuries that, like a hamstring tear won't work. It's got to be something really that you can see, like a dislocation, like, Woke's popping his shoulder out. There's no argument about that. You can't say you can't argue about whether his shoulder's dislocated.
Yeah.
Well, when he did it, because we all saw him do it. So anyway, that's
the danger with that, though, man. The danger with that is you've got to be, when you write into the legislation the types of injuries you get, you've got to be pretty specific. And what if something happens that you've never seen before or didn't anticipate, and then it's like you sort
bad
of
luck,
be picky and choosy.
Or even worse, you get players like dislocating their shoulders on purpose, popping them out. Having a bad game.
A bit of a masochist, wouldn't you, to do that?
Well, Mel Gibson, Lethal Weapon comes to mind. All right. Let's take our final break. Then we'll be back with a little bit more cricket news, then Can't Let It Go. You are listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. You're with Manners and Damien Watson, and we've got a couple of cricket headlines. So, Damien, while it is cold here in Sydney and Melbourne, 2 T20 competitions, two white ball competitions are going on. Stuff you, the 100. Can't even say that without the 100 tripping it up. So the CPL is started, and Tim David's over there smashing sixes already. So good to see. And the 100 is still going, but it's coming to the end. The one thing I do like about the 100 is starts and ends in August, basically. So it's going to be over at the end of August. Steve Smith has failed to fire in the 100 so far, but Phoebe Litchfield, a friend of the show, has been smoking them for the Northern Superchargers. She smashed 54 off 38 to win it for them versus the London Spirit overnight. And then last week, an insane shot from Litchfield to win the game, hit a reverse straight drive to win the game last week for the Northern Superchargers. Basically turned to do a switch hit. It was a half volley and just smacked it down the ground the other way for 4. An incredible player. And at the moment, in the leading run scorers for the women's 100, the 3 of the top 4 are Australians. Grace Harris is on top, Meg Lanning 2. Then you've got English player Danny Wyatt and Phoebe Litchfield number 4. And as I said, it ends on the 31st of August. So if you want to watch some 100, watch it now before it's all over. I don't know, have you caught any of the CPL or the 100? I have watched some of the CPL, just bits and pieces. It is a good tournament. I do like the island vibe that it brings. It is just relaxing to watch. It is something charming about watching the CPL, one of the original T20 tournaments. And yeah, as I said, Tim David was in fine form. I saw him smash a number of balls out of the ground for St. Lucia a couple of nights ago.
I've seen some of the 100 metres. Often that's broadcast on pay TV, so you sort of see that in the background. But I've liked the form of Grace Harris in particular. And there was a time, Menas, where she couldn't get a gig in that Australian team. I think people forget about 4 or 5 years ago. So it's amazing, isn't it, given her strike power and the fact that she takes it in her stride as well. One of the great characters of cricket, world cricket, it must be said. So
it doesn't, I think she names her bats after. See, she is such a typical down-to-earth Aussie. She names her bats after fast food dishes. So I think she's got like a Whopper bat, a McCrispy, a Zinger bat. I love it. She's such a character, and you're right. Great to see her doing well. And you know, the women's 100 has been far more compelling for me to watch, but it is also at a much easier time zone because of the double headers. You can often watch the women's game live. But the men's game is a bit later on. All right, so that's the wrap up of all the cricket headlines. It never ends. Lots to come on the podcast. As I said, an extra episode with Lisa Stalaker coming probably early next week. Got some feature interviews. We're rolling into summer. It's a huge one. The Ashes, the biggest summer in a long time, I think, and very, very excited. But now it's can't let it go. That little bit of cricket news you just can't let go through to the keeper. Damien, what's yours today?
Well, Manners, you mentioned the passing of Bob Simpson before. I wanted to actually pose this as a can't let it go type of question. What are your thoughts on the hook shot? Because Bob Simpson, I don't think was a big fan of it as coach in terms of players playing it. And Ian Chappell always had that disagreement with him, and Chappell, he was one of the great exponents of the hook shot. What are your thoughts in terms of the way it's used now? I think you still should learn it. You should, if you're going to be out there in international cricket, you've got to learn every shot in the book.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know Simo and Chappelli had a fight, I think, because Simo told Chappelli he should put the hook shot away, and Chappelli wasn't too happy with that. And then I also think there was a bit of a disagreement between them because obviously Chappelli was part of World Series cricket, and Simo had retired from cricket because he wasn't getting paid enough as a player. But then he came back and played for the establishment rather than supporting the players and playing for World Series cricket if he was going to play for anyone. So, yeah, they're probably not great mates. They weren't great mates. So on that, I think it's a good question about the hook shot. It's such a different game now to when Simo was coaching. Shorter boundaries. But I think there's an old adage that to succeed at international level, you need to have one of the cross-bat shots. You need to be able to cut or you need to be able to pull. So I think you need one of them.
Fair enough. So, yeah, that's my can't let it go. Just something that's simmered in my head.
Good on you. Now, I've got 2 can't let it goes. My first can't let it go is Sam Constas has re-signed for the Sydney Thunder, a 4-year extension, inclusive of the upcoming BBL, and it's fantastic. And I'm, as I've said before, I'm surprised Constas is not talked about more as being part of Australia's white ball squads. I think he should be an integral member of both of Australia's white ball squads. From what I've seen of Constas at domestic white ball level in T20 and 50 over cricket, he's built for it. And I'm just surprised that the selectors aren't using white ball cricket as an opportunity to give him more exposure to international level. But great news for Sydney Thunder fans. I mean, he's one of the rising stars of international cricket. Trent Copeland, who's taken over the management of the Sydney Thunder, he's done such a good job in locking Constas down, because basically when you think about it, Constas had Sydney Sixers written all over him. I mean, his Sydney Sixers is the most glamorous club in Sydney, and it's played at the SCG. Constas is the natural fit there, so this is a bit of a coup for the Thunder.
Absolutely. And I agree with you as well. Maybe because, I don't know, he stood out more so at Shield level than some of the other formats at domestic level, that he's tied. Sometimes you get typecast a little bit.
Absolutely. All right. And my other can't let it go is listening to a podcast about the partitions in the subcontinent it's a podcast called Empire, but they're doing a series on the partitions on the subcontinent. And as someone who loves cricket from the subcontinent, both Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, the whole area, I'm trying to understand where the conflicts arise from in the subcontinent, what the dispute around Kashmir, where did that come from? Because, I'm such a fan of these nations as cricket nations. And, it does make me a little sad that, there's obviously such a big conflict in that region. So I saw this series about partitions, about, what happened to produce this situation we have presently, and it's really, really interesting. So just wanted to shout that out. Empire, a new series about partitions, and I've learned a lot already about the partitions in the subcontinent, and it's a complicated story, and maybe I'll finish the series before I make any sweeping comments about it, Damien, but just wanted to shout that out. If you want to learn more about where the current conflicts arise from, then it's a great series.
Yeah, absolutely. And always good to get that level of education as well, because, we often do just look through it through a cricket lens, don't we? There's more to it, as you know.
Look, I could read a book as well, but I'm a podcast guru, so I tend to look for things in podcast form or audio books. But anyway, great series. Thanks. So thanks, everybody, for tuning into this episode of Cricket Unfiltered. I'll be back very soon with another episode. Damien, what's up with you? Where can the listeners catch up with you?
At Damo_what's on Twitter, and I'll be commentating the last 2 days. It looks like it's going to be the best of the weather days in the 4-day match between Australia A and India A. So tune in, because it was a rain-affected day earlier today.
Excellent. Oh, great stuff. Great stuff. We'll look forward to hearing about that. Listeners, you know where to find me. Annoying people on Twitter, all the details in the episode notes if you want to get in touch with the show for any reason, or me. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Back soon with Lisa Sthalekar.